Christmas morning arrived with the kind of crisp December air that usually fills me with joy, but as I stared at my phone screen, my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The text from my mother burned into my eyes like acid. "I forbid you from bringing Sophia. Your daughter is bad luck." I held my 5-month-old baby girl closer to my chest, feeling her tiny heartbeat against mine, while my wife Jessica sobbed quietly in the kitchen. This was supposed to be Sophia's first Christmas with our family, the day she'd finally meet everyone properly and be welcomed with open arms. Instead, my own parents had chosen superstition over their granddaughter, leaving us devastated and alone on the most sacred day of the year. I need to explain how we got to this devastating moment because the road to Christmas morning started 5 months ago during one of the worst thunderstorms Chicago had seen all summer. Jessica went into labor at 2 in the morning on July 15th, with lightning splitting the sky and rain pounding our apartment windows like angry fists. The drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital felt like navigating through the end of the world, with tree branches scattered across Lakeshore Drive and emergency vehicles racing through flooded intersections. Sophia entered this world during the height of that storm, her first cries mixing with thunder that shook the hospital walls. I'll never forget the moment I held her for the first time, this perfect little miracle, with Jessica's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. She was absolutely beautiful, weighing 6 pounds and 11 ounces with tiny fingers that immediately wrapped around mine like she was claiming me as her protector forever. But my mother Linda saw something entirely different. When we called to share the joyful news, her first words weren't congratulations or expressions of love. Instead, she whispered into the phone, "A baby born during such a violent storm brings omens with her." I laughed it off initially, thinking she was just overwhelmed with emotion, but her tone carried a coldness that made my stomach twist with unease. The problem started almost immediately after we brought Sophia home. My parents Frank and Linda, who had always been involved grandparents to my brother, Marcus's 3-year-old twin boys, suddenly became distant and unavailable. Every time we tried to arrange visits, they had excuses ready. Frank claimed his contracting business was experiencing an unexpected slowdown that required his constant attention. Linda insisted she was feeling under the weather with various mysterious ailments that prevented her from being around the baby. Jessica, who comes from a broken home where her parents divorced when she was 12 and scattered to different states, desperately wanted Sophia to have the loving grandparents she'd never experienced. She spent hours preparing our small apartment for family visits that never materialized, cooking elaborate meals that went uneaten, and buying photo albums that remained empty of multi-generational pictures. Meanwhile, Marcus and his wife Hannah continued bringing their twins Tyler and Connor for regular Sunday dinners at our parents' house. Linda would post photos on social media of herself baking cookies with the boys, taking them to Navy Pier, and showering them with toys and attention. The contrast was painful and obvious to everyone in our extended family, but nobody dared to address the elephant in the room. I tried desperately to bridge this growing gap, organizing family barbecues at our place and suggesting neutral meeting locations like restaurants or parks. During the few occasions when my parents did show up, they'd sit stiffly in our living room making polite conversation while carefully avoiding any direct interaction with Sophia. Linda would watch from across the room as Jessica fed or changed our daughter her face, carrying an expression of barely concealed discomfort. The situation reached a breaking point in November when I confronted them directly after yet another canceled dinner plan. I called my father's cell phone knowing he'd be more likely to give me straight answers than my mother. "Dad, we need to talk about what's going on with Sophia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and non-confrontational. Frank sighed heavily on the other end of the line, and I could hear him walking away from whatever room he'd been in. "Son, your mother has some concerns about the timing of Sophia's birth and certain events that have happened since then." "What kind of events?" I pressed, feeling my patience starting to fray around the edges. Well, you know my business has been struggling since July, and Mrs. Henderson's dog died the week after Sophia was born, and there have been some other coincidences that have your mother worried. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, are you seriously suggesting that my newborn daughter is somehow responsible for random events that have nothing to do with her? Before Frank could respond, I heard Linda's voice in the background demanding to know who he was talking to. Within seconds, she had taken the phone from him, her tone sharp and defensive. Dean, I've been trying to be patient with this situation, but I think you need to understand some realities about what's been happening since that child was born. She began using a voice I remembered from my teenage years when I was in serious trouble. That child, I repeated, feeling anger surge through my chest. Her name is Sofia, Mom. She's your granddaughter. Sofia brings negative energy wherever she goes. Linda continued, completely ignoring my correction. She cries constantly, which disturbs the natural harmony of family gatherings. I've been consulting with a spiritual advisor named Madame Rosa, and she's confirmed my instincts about the situation. The conversation spiraled downward from there, with Linda listing increasingly bizarre examples of Sophia's alleged influence on our family's misfortunes. She mentioned that Jessica's car had gotten a flat tire 2 weeks after Sophia's birth, that our neighbor's air conditioning unit had broken down in August, and that she herself had developed headaches whenever she spent time around our daughter. I think you need to reconsider your priorities. Linda concluded, her voice taking on a tone of finality that I'd never heard directed at me before. This family has enjoyed peace and prosperity for years, and I won't allow that to be disrupted by influences beyond our control. I hung up the phone feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach, but the worst revelation was yet to come. When I asked about my grandmother, Eleanor, hoping she might serve as a voice of reason and family unity, Linda's response destroyed my last hope for a peaceful resolution. Your grandmother agrees with our decision and won't be attending Christmas either, Linda said, with cold satisfaction. She's 84 years old and too tired for family drama. She understands that sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. The possibility that even Eleanor, who had always been the heart of our family gatherings and the keeper of our traditions, had turned against Sophia left me feeling completely isolated and defeated. I stared at the phone. After ending the call, realizing that my wife and daughter had been systematically excluded from the family I'd grown up believing would love them unconditionally. The morning after that devastating phone call, I found Jessica sitting at our kitchen table with her laptop open, tears streaming down her face as she stared at photos from previous family Christmas celebrations. Sophia was sleeping peacefully in her bouncy seat nearby, completely unaware that she'd become the center of a family crisis that threatened to tear apart everything we'd built together. I've been secretly hoping that Christmas would heal this terrible rift. Jessica confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been texting with your grandmother Eleanor behind your back, asking for advice about how to make peace with your parents. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. What did she say to you? Jessica pulled up their text conversation on her phone, showing me months of increasingly desperate messages. She'd been reaching out to Eleanor since August, sending photos of Sophia's milestones and asking for guidance about the family situation. But Eleanor's responses had been brief and somewhat cold, suggesting that Jessica should give Linda space to process her feelings and be patient with the adjustment period. I don't understand why she's being so distant. Jessica continued scrolling through the disappointing exchanges. I thought she'd be excited to have another great-granddaughter, but she barely responds to the pictures I send, and she never asks to visit or spend time with Sophia. Jessica then shared something that broke my heart completely. She told me about her childhood Christmas mornings spent alone with her mother after her father left, watching other families through their windows as they celebrated together. Her mother had struggled with depression and often forgot to buy presents or prepare special meals leaving Jessica to create her own holiday magic with whatever she could find around their small apartment. I promised myself that when I had children, they would never feel that kind of loneliness during the holidays, she said, wiping tears from her cheeks. I wanted Sofia to grow up surrounded by relatives who adore her with traditions and memories that would last her whole lifetime. Instead, she's being treated like some kind of curse. The breaking point came when Jessica threatened to pack Sofia's things and drive to Portland to spend Christmas with her Aunt Sarah, the only family member who had consistently shown interest in our daughter. I can't watch my baby be rejected by people who are supposed to love her unconditionally. She declared already moving toward Sofia's nursery to start gathering clothes and supplies. I knew I had to do something drastic to save both my marriage and my relationship with my family. That afternoon, I made an impulsive decision to drive to Sunset Manor, the assisted living facility where Eleanor had been living since her fall last spring. I needed to hear directly from her why she was supporting my parents' cruel treatment of Sofia. The drive through Lincoln Park took about 25 minutes, giving me time to rehearse what I wanted to say. Eleanor had always been the family mediator, the wise grandmother who could see past petty conflicts to find solutions that brought everyone together. If anyone could help me understand this impossible situation, it would be her. But when I arrived at Sunset Manor, the receptionist informed me that Eleanor had been moved to a different wing of the facility following a hip injury she'd sustained 3 weeks earlier. She's in our rehabilitation section now, explained a friendly nurse named Betty. Are you family? I'm her great-grandson. I replied, feeling guilty that I hadn't known about Eleanor's injury. How serious was her fall? Betty's expression became concerned as she led me through corridors lined with holiday decorations. Mrs. Thompson has been having a difficult recovery period. She seems confused much of the time, and she's been asking about her family constantly. She keeps mentioning someone named Sofia and asking when she'll get to meet her. My heart began racing as we approached Eleanor's room. Betty knocked gently before opening the door, revealing my grandmother sitting in a wheelchair near the window, looking smaller and more frail than I'd ever seen her. She was wearing a pink sweater I'd never seen before and holding a small photo in her weathered hands. "Eleanor, you have a visitor," Betty announced gently. "Your grandson Dean is here to see you." Eleanor looked up at me with eyes that seemed both familiar and distant, as if she was trying to place me in her memory. Then her face lit up with recognition and joy. "Dean. Oh, my sweet boy. I've been wondering when you'd come to see me. Where have you been?" I sat down in the chair next to her wheelchair, noticing that the photo in her hands was actually a picture of Sofia from her newborn photography session. "Grandma, I've been trying to call you for months, but Mom said you didn't want to be bothered." Eleanor's confusion was immediate and heartbreaking. "What do you mean I haven't received any calls from you? I've been waiting and waiting for news about your beautiful baby girl." She held up Sofia's photo with trembling hands. "This is Sofia, isn't it, your little angel? When do I get to meet her properly?" The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place with sickening clarity. Eleanor hadn't been avoiding our family or supporting my parents' decision to exclude Sofia. She'd been systematically isolated and fed false information about our situation. "Grandma, what has Mom been telling you about Sofia and our family?" Eleanor's face crumpled with confusion and pain. "Linda told me that you and Jessica were having marriage problems because of stress from the new baby. She said you were planning to move across the country for Jessica's job, and that you didn't want me getting too attached to Sofia because I'd just be heartbroken when you left. The manipulation was even worse than I'd imagined." I spent the next 2 hours with Eleanor showing her recent photos of Sofia and explaining the real situation our family was facing. As the truth emerged, Eleanor became increasingly lucid and angry, revealing details that painted a disturbing picture of systematic deception and control. "Linda has been managing some of my affairs since my fall," Eleanor explained, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. She told me she was helping with my finances and communications because I was too confused to handle them myself. But Dean, I'm not confused about what matters most. I've been giving her money every month thinking it was going toward Sofia's college fund. Eleanor reached into her nightstand drawer and pulled out a small pile of greeting cards, baby gifts still in their original wrapping, and a handmade photo album she'd been creating for Sofia. I've been preparing these for months, waiting for the right time to give them to you. Linda kept saying you were too busy and stressed for family visits, but I never stopped thinking about that precious baby. The final twist came when Eleanor revealed the extent of Linda's deception. She told me you and Jessica were getting divorced and moving away with Sofia. She said it would be too painful for me to get attached to my great-granddaughter if I was just going to lose her anyway. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears of rage and grief. I've been heartbroken for months, believing I'd never get the chance to be a real grandmother to Sofia. As I sat there holding Eleanor's hand, watching her process the magnitude of Linda's lies, I realized that my mother had been playing an elaborate game of manipulation that hurt everyone involved. She'd isolated Eleanor, deceived Jessica, and created a false narrative that justified her own irrational fears about Sofia. The question now was what I was going to do about it. I stayed with Eleanor for the next 3 hours, carefully documenting every detail of Linda's systematic deception, while my grandmother's mind became increasingly sharp and focused. Eleanor had been keeping a small notebook beside her bed, where she'd been tracking Linda's visits and recording the stories she'd been told about our family's situation. "Look at this, Dean," Eleanor said, flipping through pages of her careful handwriting. "Linda visited on October 5th and told me you'd gotten a promotion that would require moving to Seattle. Then, on October 12th, she said Jessica's mother was sick, and you might need to relocate to Florida to help care for her. On October 19th, she claimed your marriage was in counseling because of financial stress from the baby. The dates and details were all contradictory, revealing Linda's pattern of creating elaborate, fictional scenarios to justify keeping Eleanor away from our family. But the notebook contained something even more disturbing: careful records of financial transactions and requests that Linda had been making on Eleanor's behalf. She's been asking about my will and inheritance plans." Eleanor confided, showing me several pages where she documented Linda's probing questions about property values and investment accounts. Last month, she suggested I should consider setting up a trust fund that she could manage for Sofia's future, but she wanted me to transfer the money immediately for tax purposes. I felt sick to my stomach as the full scope of Linda's manipulation became clear. This wasn't just about excluding Sofia from family gatherings. It was about isolating Eleanor and potentially exploiting her financially while creating a false narrative that justified the isolation. Before leaving Eleanor's room, I had a crucial conversation with Beverly Chen, the facility's social worker. Beverly had been monitoring Eleanor's case since her fall and had growing concerns about the sudden changes in her social interactions and decision-making patterns. "Your grandmother was very active and social when she first arrived here," Beverly explained as we sat in her small office. "She participated in group activities, made friends easily, and seemed mentally sharp and engaged. But over the past few months, she's become increasingly withdrawn and confused. We've noticed that her daughter-in-law, Linda, has been very controlling about visitors and phone calls." Beverly showed me documentation indicating that Linda had requested Eleanor not receive upsetting phone calls from family members who might cause her emotional distress. She'd also been intercepting Eleanor's mail, claiming she was helping organize Eleanor's correspondence and bills. "We've been concerned about the isolation," Beverly continued, "but Linda assured us that the family was protecting Eleanor from unnecessary stress during her recovery. However, your visit today has been the most animated and engaged I've seen your grandmother in weeks." Armed with this information, I drove home and immediately called my brother Marcus, pretending I needed his emotional support in dealing with the Christmas situation. Marcus and his wife Hannah lived about 30 minutes away in Evanston, where they were raising their twin boys in a house similar to the one we'd grown up in. Dean. I'm glad you called, Marcus said, his voice carrying a tension I hadn't expected. Hannah and I have been really uncomfortable with this whole Sofia situation, but we didn't know how to approach it without making things worse. When Hannah got on the phone, her honesty was both relieving and disturbing. We know about the Christmas party ban, and we think it's completely unfair to Sofia and your family. But Linda has been filling Tyler and Connor's heads with strange stories about baby Sofia being different and potentially dangerous to be around. This revelation horrified me. What kind of stories? She told them that some babies bring bad luck to families and that Sofia might make them sick if they spend too much time around her. Hannah explained, her voice heavy with guilt. The boys have been having nightmares about bad baby Sofia, and we finally realized we needed to have serious conversations with them about how babies are actually blessings, not threats. Marcus took the phone back and confessed something that changed everything. Dad has been secretly visiting Eleanor without Mom's knowledge. He feels terrible about the whole situation, but he's afraid that if he opposes Mom directly, she might have some kind of breakdown. She's been seeing a therapist who apparently encourages her protective maternal instincts, whatever that means. That evening, I decided to return to Sunset Manor to continue gathering information and supporting Eleanor. When I arrived, I was shocked to find my father, Frank, sitting in Eleanor's room looking exhausted and guilty as he held her hand. Dean, he said, standing up quickly with obvious embarrassment. I didn't expect to see you here. Dad, we need to talk about what's been happening to our family. Frank looked older than his 55 years as he slumped back into his chair. Son, I know this situation has gotten completely out of control, but I don't know how to fix it without destroying my marriage to your mother. Eleanor spoke up with surprising strength in her voice. Frank, you need to tell Dean the truth about Patricia and this ridiculous psychic advisor business. Frank's face went pale as he realized Eleanor was far more lucid than Linda had been claiming. Mom, Linda made me promise not to discuss the family's private business with anyone. I'm not anyone, I'm your mother, and Dean deserves to know what's really behind this insanity, Eleanor replied firmly. What Frank told us next was the most shocking revelation, yet Linda's spiritual advisor, Madame Rosa, was actually Linda's younger sister, Patricia, who had moved to Chicago from Las Vegas 3 months ago after filing for bankruptcy and losing her apartment due to gambling debts. Patricia has been living in our basement since September. Frank confessed, his voice barely audible. She convinced Linda that she had developed psychic abilities during her spiritual awakening in Nevada, and she's been charging Linda $200 per session for spiritual guidance about Sofia and the family situation. Eleanor's reaction was immediate and fierce. You're telling me that Linda has been paying her unemployed bankrupt sister to validate her ridiculous superstitions about my great-granddaughter? Frank nodded miserably. Patricia encourages all of Linda's worst fears and suggests increasingly extreme measures to protect our family from Sofia's influence. Last week, she told Linda that Sofia's presence at Christmas could cause permanent spiritual damage to Tyler and Connor. The conspiracy was even more elaborate and disturbing than I'd imagined. Patricia had been manipulating Linda's maternal anxieties and financial resources, while Linda systematically isolated Eleanor and excluded Sofia from the family. Frank had been caught in the middle, watching his wife's mental health deteriorate while feeling powerless to intervene. Dad, this has to stop, I said firmly. Eleanor deserves to know her great-granddaughter, and Sofia deserves to grow up knowing her family loves her. Eleanor squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Dean, I want you to bring Sofia to Christmas dinner regardless of what Linda says. I'm going to attend that party, and I'm going to meet my great-granddaughter properly. Frank looked terrified at the prospect of the confrontation this would create, but Eleanor's determination was absolute. Frank, either you support this family healing, or you continue enabling Linda's destructive behavior. But I'm 84 years old, and I refuse to waste whatever time I have left because your wife is being manipulated by her con artist sister. As I drove home that night, I realized that Christmas Day was going to become a battleground where the truth would finally be revealed and our family's future would be determined. The next morning, Eleanor was transformed into a woman on a mission. When I arrived at Sunset Manor with Jessica and Sofia, for what Eleanor insisted should be their first proper meeting, I found my grandmother dressed in her best blue dress and fully lucid with a stack of legal documents spread across her bedside table. Beverly from Social Services helped me contact my attorney yesterday evening. Eleanor announced as Jessica placed Sofia in her arms for the first time. I've been reviewing all of my financial records, and Linda has been forging my signature on checks made out to cash for the past 2 months. Watching Eleanor hold Sofia was magical and heartbreaking simultaneously. My grandmother's face lit up with pure joy as Sofia gurgled and reached for Eleanor's pearl necklace, while tears of happiness streamed down Eleanor's cheeks. "She's absolutely perfect, Dean. How could anyone look at this beautiful child and see anything but blessing and love?" Jessica sat beside them, documenting the meeting with photos and videos, her own eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. "Eleanor, I've wanted Sofia to know her great-grandmother since the day she was born. Thank you for fighting to be part of her life. Eleanor's transformation was remarkable. She revealed that the medications she'd been taking for confusion and anxiety had been prescribed by a doctor Linda had recommended, but Eleanor's original physician had never suggested such treatments. I stopped taking those pills 3 days ago, and my mind has never been clearer," she declared with fierce determination. While Sofia napped in Eleanor's arms, we developed our strategy for Christmas Day. Eleanor insisted on attending the family party and confronting Linda directly, but she wanted to do it in a way that would expose the full scope of the deception and manipulation. I've been recording Linda's phone calls using my old answering machine. Eleanor revealed with a mischievous smile that reminded me of her younger, more rebellious days. She doesn't know that when she calls to check on me, the machine captures everything she says, including her conversations with Patricia about how to access more of my money. The recordings Eleanor played for us were devastating evidence of conspiracy and fraud. We heard Linda discussing strategies for keeping Eleanor isolated from problematic family members, and Patricia coaching Linda on how to maintain the "Sofia is bad luck" narrative. Most damaging was a conversation where Patricia explicitly outlined plans to convince Eleanor to transfer her savings into accounts that Linda could access. That afternoon, I met with Marcus and Hannah at a coffee shop near Northwestern University, where we could speak privately without their twins overhearing. I showed them copies of Eleanor's financial records and played selected portions of the recorded phone calls. "I can't believe Mom has been exploiting Grandma Eleanor while poisoning our children's minds about Sofia," Hannah said, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Marcus and I have been complicit in this by staying silent, and we need to make this right." Marcus was equally horrified by the evidence. "Dad has been caught between protecting his marriage and protecting his family, but this crosses every line. We can't let Mom and Patricia continue this fraud and manipulation." We agreed that Christmas Day would be our opportunity to expose everything in front of the entire family, ensuring that Linda and Patricia couldn't continue their deceptions or deny their actions. Eleanor would arrive as a surprise, armed with documentation and recordings that proved the scope of their conspiracy. Jessica had been conducting her own research into elder abuse laws and financial exploitation statutes. When I returned home, I found her surrounded by legal documents and notebooks filled with carefully documented evidence of Linda's harmful statements about Sofia and systematic isolation of Eleanor. "Dean, what Linda and Patricia have been doing isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal," Jessica explained, showing me printed emails and text messages she'd been preserving. Eleanor could pursue charges against both of them for financial fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit theft. That evening, Eleanor's physician, Dr. Martinez, visited her at Sunset Manor to review her medication regimen and assess her mental state. Dr. Martinez confirmed that the confusion-inducing medications had been unnecessary and potentially harmful, prescribed by a doctor who had no previous relationship with Eleanor and no access to her complete medical history. Mrs. Thompson's cognitive function is excellent for her age, Dr. Martinez documented in his report. The medication she was taking would have caused disorientation and decision-making difficulties in anyone regardless of their baseline mental capacity. I see no medical justification for the prescriptions she received. Beverly Chen also agreed to document her observations about Linda's controlling behavior and the concerning restrictions she'd placed on Eleanor's communications and social activities. The assisted living facility had growing concerns about the isolation tactics, but had been hesitant to intervene without clear evidence of abuse. On Christmas Eve, I made one final discovery that completed our understanding of Patricia's criminal background. Through online public records searches, I learned that Patricia had previous convictions for financial fraud and identity theft in Nevada and California. She owed substantial gambling debts to several creditors and had been evicted from 3 different apartments in the past 2 years. Patricia targeted our family specifically because Eleanor has assets and Linda has emotional vulnerabilities. I explained to Jessica as we prepared Sofia's diaper bag for Christmas morning. She's been running a long-term con game using spiritual manipulation to access Eleanor's money while destroying our family relationships. Eleanor had arranged for transportation to the Christmas party through Sunset Manor's medical transport service, ensuring she'd have professional supervision and assistance. She'd prepared a comprehensive presentation of evidence, including financial records recordings and witness statements from facility staff. "Tomorrow, we're going to save our family from these predators," Eleanor told me during our final planning phone call. "Sofia deserves to grow up knowing she's loved unconditionally, and I deserve to spend my remaining years enjoying my great-granddaughter without interference from criminals and manipulators." As Jessica and I tucked Sofia into her crib on Christmas Eve, we knew that the next day would determine whether our daughter would grow up as part of a loving extended family or remain isolated from relatives who should have been her greatest champions and protectors. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow covering Chicago and sunlight streaming through our apartment windows as Sofia babbled happily in her holiday dress, completely unaware that today would determine her place in our family forever. Jessica and I had barely slept, knowing we were about to walk into a confrontation that would either heal our family or destroy it completely. At 10:30, we loaded Sofia's car seat and diaper bag into our Honda Accord and drove toward my parents' house in Forest Park, where Linda had been preparing Christmas dinner for 24 people, including extended family and close friends, who had no idea they were about to witness an explosive family reckoning. The house looked beautiful from the outside with white lights twinkling around the porch and a wreath that Linda had spent hours perfecting. Cars filled the driveway and lined the street, indicating that most of the guests had already arrived for the traditional 11 o'clock gift exchange and brunch. I parked across the street and called Jessica's hand as we sat in the car for a moment gathering our courage. Sofia was sleeping peacefully in her carrier, wearing the red velvet dress Jessica had bought specifically for this day, completely trusting that her parents would protect her from whatever chaos awaited inside. "Are you ready?" Jessica asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what we were about to do. "Eleanor is counting on us." I replied, thinking about my grandmother's determination to reclaim her place in Sofia's life. Our daughter deserves to know her family, and our family deserves to know the truth. We walked up the familiar front steps and rang the doorbell instead of using my key, wanting to make it clear that we were guests who expected to be welcomed properly. When Linda opened the door, her face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, panic, and then cold determination. And cold. "I told you Sofia wasn't welcome today," she said loudly enough for people inside to hear. "You're disrupting a peaceful family celebration." Before I could respond, voices from the living room called out greetings and welcomes. Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan rushed to the door, excited to meet Sophia and wondering why they hadn't seen us at recent family gatherings. Cousin Jennifer immediately started taking photos of Sophia in her Christmas dress, cooing about how beautiful she looked. Linda's face became increasingly flustered as family members and friends surrounded us with love and enthusiasm for Sophia, completely contradicting the narrative she'd been constructing about our daughter being unwelcome or problematic. Several people mentioned that they'd been asking about Sophia for months and wondering when they'd get to meet her. "Where's the baby?" shouted 5-year-old Emma Marcus and Hannah's twin Tyler, running toward us with excitement. "Mom said we finally get to see baby Sophia today." This was clearly not what Linda had expected. She'd apparently told different stories to different family members, and the inconsistencies were becoming obvious as people reacted with joy and curiosity rather than fear or discomfort around Sophia. Frank appeared behind Linda, looking relieved and guilty as he hugged Jessica and me warmly. "I'm so glad you decided to come," he said quietly, glancing nervously at Linda's increasingly agitated expression. The situation escalated quickly when Linda pulled out her phone and stepped into the kitchen to make what she thought was a private call to Patricia, not realizing that several people could hear her conversation clearly. "You need to get over here immediately," Linda hissed into the phone. "They brought that baby despite everything we discussed, and people are acting like nothing is wrong. I need your spiritual guidance to handle this situation before it gets completely out of control." Marcus and Hannah exchanged meaningful looks as they heard Linda's call, realizing that their suspicions about Patricia's involvement were being confirmed in real time. Hannah immediately started engaging with Sophia, letting Tyler and Connor see that their baby cousin was perfectly normal and delightful, not the threatening figure Linda had described. At exactly noon, Eleanor arrived in dramatic fashion. The medical transport van pulled up outside and Beverly Chen stepped out to assist Eleanor, who was dressed in her finest holiday outfit and carrying a large gift bag filled with presents she'd been saving for Sophia. The entire house went quiet as Eleanor appeared in the doorway, supported by a walker, but radiating determination and authority. Linda's face went completely pale as she realized that her carefully constructed isolation of Eleanor had been shattered. Eleanor's several family members exclaimed with delight and surprise, "We didn't know you were coming." "How wonderful that you're here for Sophia's first Christmas." Eleanor's entrance was perfectly timed and devastatingly effective. She immediately asked to hold Sophia, and the joy and love in her face as she cradled her great-granddaughter was visible to everyone in the room. The contrast between Eleanor's obvious adoration and Linda's barely concealed hostility was stark and uncomfortable. "I've been waiting 5 months to properly meet this beautiful child," Eleanor announced loud enough for the entire gathering to hear. "And I have some very important things to share with this family about what's been happening behind the scenes." Linda tried to regain control of the situation by suggesting that Eleanor was confused and shouldn't be making important statements, but Eleanor's response was swift and devastating. "Linda, I'm going to play some recordings that will clear up any confusion about who's been manipulating whom," Eleanor said, pulling a small digital recorder from her purse. The first recording she played captured Linda, admitting to Patricia that she'd been lying to family members about Dean and Jessica's marriage problems and Sophia's alleged negative influence on family events. Linda's voice was clearly audible as she discussed strategies for keeping Eleanor isolated and maintaining the fiction that Sophia was somehow dangerous or unwelcome. The room was completely silent as people processed what they were hearing. Linda tried to grab the recorder, but Eleanor calmly moved it away and continued playing evidence of the conspiracy that had been destroying our family. Just as Eleanor began playing the most damaging recording, which captured Linda and Patricia discussing plans to access Eleanor's bank accounts, Patricia herself arrived at the house, not knowing that her cover had been blown. Patricia walked into the living room, still pretending to be the mystical Madame Rosa, wearing flowing scarves and carrying crystals, clearly expecting to provide spiritual support for Linda's efforts to remove Sophia from the family gathering. "I came as quickly as I could," Patricia announced dramatically. The negative energy in this house is overwhelming, and we need to cleanse the space before permanent damage occurs to the family's spiritual harmony." Eleanor's response was magnificent and perfectly timed. "Patricia Ann Morrison, you can drop the Madame Rosa act. Everyone here now knows you're Linda's unemployed sister who's been running a con game on our family while living in my son's basement." The revelation that Madame Rosa was actually Patricia Linda's sister sent shockwaves through the room. Family members who had heard Linda reference her spiritual advisor for months suddenly understood that the entire supernatural narrative had been fabricated by a desperate woman with gambling debts and a criminal history. Eleanor then produced documents showing Patricia's bankruptcy filing eviction notices and criminal background distributing copies to several family members, while explaining how Patricia had been manipulating Linda's maternal anxieties to access Eleanor's finances. This woman has been charging Linda $200 per session to validate her irrational fears about Sofia, while systematically isolating me from my great-granddaughter, Eleanor declared with the authority of a judge delivering a verdict. Patricia realized her scam had been completely exposed and tried to leave immediately, but Eleanor had already called the police to report the financial fraud and elder abuse that had been documented through months of recorded phone calls and forged financial documents. Linda collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed by the public exposure of her deception and manipulation. The family members who had been kept in the dark about the real situation began asking questions and demanding explanations for months of strange behavior and conflicting stories. Frank stood up and addressed the room with more authority than I'd seen from him in years. "Linda and Patricia are no longer welcome at family gatherings until they face the consequences of their actions and make restitution for the damage they've caused." As if the day couldn't become more dramatic, 2 Chicago police officers arrived to investigate Eleanor's report of financial elder abuse and fraud. Patricia was arrested in front of the entire family, charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and theft from a vulnerable adult. Eleanor announced that she was immediately changing her will to protect future generations from similar manipulation, and that she would be pursuing full legal action to recover all stolen funds and ensure that Patricia faced appropriate criminal penalties. The Christmas party transformed from Linda's carefully controlled gathering into a celebration of truth, justice, and family healing, with Sofia at the center of it all, finally receiving the love and welcome she deserved from relatives who had been kept away by lies and manipulation. The immediate aftermath of Christmas Day was swift and decisive. Within 2 hours of Patricia's arrest, Detective Maria Santos from the Chicago Police Department's Elder Abuse Unit was interviewing Eleanor at my parents' house, documenting the extensive evidence of financial fraud and systematic manipulation that had been perpetrated against our family. Patricia was charged with 3 felonies: financial exploitation of an elderly person, conspiracy to commit theft and fraud against a vulnerable adult. The evidence Eleanor had gathered, including recorded phone calls, forged documents, and witness testimony from Sunset Manor staff, created an airtight case that Patricia's public defender advised her not to contest. Linda was not criminally charged, but she faced serious civil liability for her role in the conspiracy. Eleanor's attorney, William Hayes, filed a comprehensive lawsuit seeking full restitution of stolen funds, plus damages for emotional distress and medical expenses related to the unnecessary medications Linda had arranged for Eleanor to receive. The financial investigation revealed that Linda and Patricia had stolen nearly $15,000 from Eleanor over 4 months using forged signatures and manipulated banking records. Patricia had been using the money to pay gambling debts and personal expenses, while Linda had funded spa treatments, shopping trips, and payments to other fraudulent spiritual advisors. Frank made the difficult decision to separate from Linda, immediately moving into an extended stay hotel while he processed the magnitude of his wife's betrayal and deception. He admitted to me that he'd been enabling Linda's behavior out of fear and misplaced loyalty, and he committed to attending counseling to understand how he'd allowed the situation to escalate so dramatically. I failed to protect my mother and my granddaughter, Frank told me during a painful conversation at Eleanor's new apartment. I chose the path of least resistance instead of standing up for what was right, and I'm ashamed of the damage that caused. Marcus and Hannah became passionate advocates for Sofia and our family, making up for months of lost time by organizing weekly visits and including us in every possible family activity. They had extensive conversations with Tyler and Connor about how they'd been misled about Sofia, and the twins quickly developed a loving, protective relationship with their baby cousin. "We should have spoken up months ago," Hannah admitted during one of our family dinners. "We knew something wasn't right, but we were afraid of creating more conflict instead of preventing it. We'll never let our children be manipulated like that again." Eleanor's transition to independent living was remarkable and inspiring. With her mind completely clear and her finances properly protected, she moved to a beautiful senior apartment complex only 10 minutes from our home. She became Sofia's primary babysitter and most devoted advocate, spending several hours each week creating photo albums and planning activities for Sofia's future. The assisted living facility where Eleanor had been staying conducted a comprehensive review of their policies regarding family member involvement in resident communications and financial decisions. Beverly Chen used Eleanor's case as an example in training programs for other social workers dealing with suspected elder abuse and isolation. Linda's consequences extended far beyond the legal and financial penalties. Word of her treatment of Sofia and exploitation of Eleanor spread throughout their social circle church congregation and community organizations where she'd been active. Her reputation was permanently damaged, and she found herself socially isolated as friends and neighbors learned about her actions. The church where Linda had been a volunteer coordinator for 15 years asked her to step down from all leadership positions after several congregation members expressed concern about her judgment and character. Her book club disbanded when other members became uncomfortable with her presence, and she was quietly removed from the board of a local charity where she'd served for 8 years. Most significantly, Linda was required to attend intensive therapy and anger management counseling as a condition of avoiding criminal prosecution for her role in the elder abuse conspiracy. The court-mandated treatment included specialized counseling for family relationship disorders and financial manipulation behaviors. Dr. Rachel Cohen, Linda's court-appointed therapist, diagnosed her with several underlying mental health conditions that had been exacerbated by Patricia's manipulation. Linda suffered from severe anxiety disorders, pathological need for control, and deep-seated fears about family loyalty that made her susceptible to conspiracy thinking and paranoid ideation. Eleanor established a legal foundation called the Sofia Thompson Foundation for Family Justice, dedicated to protecting grandchildren from family rejection and elderly people from financial exploitation by relatives. The foundation provided legal assistance counseling services and educational resources for families dealing with similar situations. Eleanor named me as the foundation's executive director and Sofia as its primary beneficiary, ensuring that our experience would help other families avoid the trauma and division we'd endured. The foundation's first major initiative was a comprehensive education program for assisted living facilities about recognizing and preventing family member manipulation of elderly residents. 6 months after Christmas, Patricia was sentenced to 3 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution to Eleanor and 2 other elderly victims whose cases came to light during the investigation. Patricia's criminal network had been targeting vulnerable families throughout the Chicago area, using spiritual manipulation and family anxiety to access financial resources. Eleanor testified at Patricia's sentencing hearing, delivering a powerful victim impact statement that was later used in training programs for prosecutors handling elder abuse cases. "This woman didn't just steal my money," Eleanor said. "She stole 5 months of precious time with my great-granddaughter that I can never get back." Frank successfully completed 6 months of intensive therapy and began the process of rebuilding relationships with our family based on honesty, accountability, and genuine commitment to protecting Sophia and Eleanor. He divorced Linda and established his own apartment nearby, becoming a devoted grandfather who visited Sophia several times each week. Linda's journey toward redemption was longer and more complex. After completing a full year of court-mandated therapy, she began writing letters of apology to Eleanor, Sophia, Jessica, and me. The letters demonstrated genuine understanding of the damage she'd caused and sincere commitment to making amends for her actions. Linda also began volunteering with an elderly abuse prevention program, using her experience to educate other families about the warning signs of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. Her volunteer work was supervised and limited, but it represented genuine effort to transform her guilt into positive action. The most meaningful consequence was Linda's gradual re-entry into Sophia's life under carefully controlled conditions. After demonstrating consistent progress in therapy and making full financial restitution to Eleanor, Linda was allowed supervised visits with Sophia in neutral locations with Jessica or me present. These visits were initially awkward and emotional, but over time, they evolved into genuine opportunities for Linda to develop a healthy relationship with her granddaughter based on respect rather than control. Linda learned to follow our parenting decisions without argument and to express love for Sophia without attempting to manipulate family dynamics. Eleanor's victory was complete when she hosted our family's Christmas celebration the following year in her apartment with Frank, Marcus, Hannah, the twins, Jessica, Sophia, and even Linda in attendance for a brief supervised visit. The contrast with the previous year's chaos was striking and satisfying, proving that truth and justice had restored peace and love to our family relationships. 18 months after that devastating Christmas morning text message, I'm writing this story while watching Sophia take her first steps across Eleanor's living room, her tiny hands reaching for her great-grandmother's outstretched arms as sunlight streams through windows, decorated with family photos spanning 4 generations. Eleanor, now 85 and thriving in her independent apartment, has become Sophia's closest companion and most devoted advocate. Every Tuesday and Thursday she babysits, while Jessica works her part-time nursing shifts, creating adventures and memories that fill photo albums and video collections Eleanor maintains with meticulous care. Sophia learns something new every day. Eleanor tells me, as our daughter claps her hands with delight at successfully walking 3 whole steps without falling. Yesterday she said Gigi for the first time, and today she figured out how to stack 3 blocks without knocking them over. I'm documenting everything so she'll have a complete record of these precious early years. The transformation in our family relationships has been profound and lasting. Frank, who finalized his divorce from Linda 8 months ago, has become the grandfather I always hoped he'd be. He visits Sophia twice a week, taking her to playgrounds and children's museums while sharing stories about our family's history and traditions. I wasted 5 months of Sophia's infancy because I was afraid to stand up to your mother, Frank admitted during a recent conversation as he pushed Sophia on a swing at the neighborhood park. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that cowardice by being the grandfather Sophia deserves. Marcus and Hannah have become our closest friends and most reliable family support system. Their twins Tyler and Connor, now 4 years old, are Sophia's devoted big cousins who fight over who gets to help feed her lunch and read her bedtime stories during family sleepovers. The boys talk about Sophia constantly at preschool, Hannah tells me, as we watch all 3 children playing together in Eleanor's living room. They tell everyone that she's the smartest, funniest baby in the world, and they're planning to teach her to ride bikes when she gets bigger. Jessica has blossomed into the confident mother and family member she always wanted to be. With Eleanor's guidance and our extended family's support, she's developed parenting skills and family traditions that give Sophia the sense of belonging and unconditional love that Jessica never experienced as a child. I used to be terrified that I wouldn't know how to create a loving family because I didn't grow up with one, Jessica confided recently as she organized Sophia's first birthday party. But Eleanor has taught me that love is something you choose to practice every day, not something you inherit automatically. Linda's journey toward redemption has been gradual but genuine. After completing 18 months of intensive therapy, anger management counseling, and community service with elder abuse prevention programs, she's been allowed to attend supervised family gatherings and develop a cautious relationship with Sophia. Linda's Christmas letter to our family last year demonstrated remarkable growth and insight. I realize now that my fear of losing control led me to try to control everyone else's happiness. I allowed my own anxiety and my sister's manipulation to nearly destroy the most precious relationships in my life. Sophia didn't bring bad luck to our family, she brought truth, and I wasn't ready to accept it. Linda's supervised visits with Sophia happen once a month in Eleanor's apartment, where she reads books, plays gentle games, and follows our parenting guidelines without question or criticism. These interactions are still somewhat formal and careful, but they represent genuine progress toward healing and forgiveness. I don't expect Sophia to love me the way she loves Eleanor or Frank, Linda wrote in a recent letter. But I hope that someday she'll understand that people can learn from their mistakes and become better, and that families can heal from terrible wounds if everyone commits to truth and kindness. Patricia received the justice she deserved, serving 32 months in state prison before being released under strict probation supervision that prohibits her from contacting any members of our family. She was also required to pay full restitution to Eleanor and other victims, though her inability to find stable employment has made the payments irregular and insufficient. Eleanor's Sophia Thompson Foundation for Family Justice has helped more than 200 families navigate similar situations of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and family manipulation. The foundation provides legal assistance counseling services and educational resources that help vulnerable people protect themselves from predatory relatives and con artists. Sophia's story became the catalyst for protecting other children and elderly people from the kind of trauma we experienced. Eleanor explains to visitors who come to learn about the foundation's work. Sometimes terrible situations create opportunities to prevent other families from suffering the same pain. Eleanor's health has remained stable and strong with regular medical checkups confirming that the medications Linda had arranged were indeed unnecessary and potentially harmful. Eleanor's mental clarity and physical independence have been maintained through proper medical care, regular exercise, and the joy of being actively involved in Sophia's daily life. The assisted living facility where Eleanor previously resided has implemented comprehensive policy changes based on our experience. They now require court orders before family members can restrict residents' communications, and they provide independent advocates for residents whose families attempt to limit their social interactions or decision-making autonomy. Dr. Martinez, Eleanor's physician, has used our case in medical conferences about recognizing medication-induced confusion in elderly patients. Mrs. Thompson's recovery demonstrates the importance of questioning unnecessary prescriptions and maintaining open communication between elderly patients and their healthcare providers. He explains to other doctors studying elder care. Sophia's first birthday party, held at Eleanor's apartment with 25 family members and friends in attendance, represented everything we dreamed of when she was born. Sophia wore a pink dress Eleanor had hand-sewn, blew out her candle, with help from Tyler and Connor, and received gifts from relatives who competed to make her laugh and smile. Frank gave a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. This little girl taught our family that love isn't something you deserve or earn based on circumstances beyond your control. Sophia was worthy of our love from the moment she was born, regardless of storms or superstitions or anyone's fears about the future. She helped us remember that families are built on acceptance, not conditions. Jessica and I have learned that protecting our daughter's dignity and place in our family required courage we didn't know we possessed. Standing up to Linda's manipulation and exposing Patricia's fraud felt impossible when we were in the middle of it, but the alternative would have been allowing Sofia to grow up believing she was somehow flawed or unwelcome in her own family. I'm proud that Sofia will grow up knowing her parents fought for her right to be loved unconditionally. Jessica said recently as we tucked Sofia into her crib after a long day of family activities. She'll never have to wonder whether she belongs or whether her existence brings joy to the people who matter most. The most important lesson our family learned is that true love requires defending the innocent and vulnerable, even when that means confronting people we care about who are making destructive choices. Staying silent about Linda's treatment of Sofia would have been easier in the short term, but it would have taught Sofia that family love is conditional and unpredictable. Eleanor's wisdom has guided our healing process. Real family bonds are built on justice and truth, not just blood and tradition. When someone tries to exclude a child from family love, everyone else has a responsibility to protect that child, regardless of the personal cost. Sofia will grow up knowing that she has relatives who moved mountains to ensure she felt welcomed and cherished from her earliest days. She'll learn that her great-grandmother Eleanor fought corrupt systems and dishonest people to protect her right to family relationships. Most importantly, she'll understand that love is something you choose and practice, not something you inherit automatically. As I watch Sofia playing peacefully in Eleanor's lap, while Jessica prepares dinner and Frank reads stories to Tyler and Connor, I realize that our family's crisis created something more beautiful and genuine than what we had before. The relationships that survived Patricia's manipulation and Linda's fears are now based on honesty, respect, and conscious commitment to each other's well-being. Sofia's presence in our lives has taught us that babies don't bring good luck or bad luck. They bring opportunities for adults to choose love over fear, truth over manipulation, and justice over convenience. She gave us the chance to become the family we were meant to be all along, and we're grateful every day that we found the courage to fight for that blessing. This Christmas, Sofia will be 18 months old, walking confidently and saying dozens of words, including Gigi for Eleanor, Papa for Frank and Mama, and Dada for Jessica and me. She'll open presents surrounded by relatives who adore her unconditionally, creating memories that will last her entire lifetime. The text message that shattered our world last Christmas Day ultimately led us to discover who our real family members were and what genuine love looks like in practice. Sofia brought truth to our relationships, and that truth set us all free to love each other more authentically and completely. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting someone you love? How did you find the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it meant confronting family members or friends who were making harmful choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please hit that like button if Sofia's story resonated with your own experiences of family challenges and healing. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary families overcoming extraordinary obstacles through courage, truth, and unconditional love. Thank you for listening to our family's journey from heartbreak to healing. I hope Sofia's story reminds you that every child deserves to be welcomed with joy, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is fight for the truth, regardless of how difficult that fight becomes. Remember that families are built on the choices we make every day to protect, support, and cherish each other. Sofia taught us that love isn't just a feeling. It's a commitment to justice, truth, and the courage to defend those who cannot defend themselves. Share this story with anyone who needs to be reminded that standing up for love is always worth the struggle, and that truth has the power to heal even the deepest family wounds.